My name is Oliver, and I'm 33. I don't usually post on Reddit, but after what happened at my grandfather's will reading, I've been sitting on this story for a while, not out of fear or guilt, just processing, I guess. You grow up thinking family means something, and then one day, you watch them tear each other apart over what's left of someone you actually loved, someone they only remembered when it was convenient. My grandfather, Arthur, was my hero, the kind of man who didn't say much but always showed up. When I was 8 and broke my leg falling off a skateboard, he was the one who stayed with me overnight in the hospital. When my dad walked out on us a year later, it was Grandpa Arthur who helped my mom keep the lights on. We moved into a small rental across town, and while the rest of the family lived comfortably on his dime, new boats, vacation homes, renovations, we got by barely. I think that's why he trusted us most, because we never asked for anything. My mom is his youngest daughter. She doesn't talk much about her siblings, and when I was a kid, I didn't really understand why. I remember once asking why we never went to Aunt Vanessa's pool parties like my cousins. She just said, some invitations come with strings. At the time, I thought she meant we just weren't close. It wasn't until years later I realized the truth. They saw her as the charity case, the one who married a loser, had a problem child, and ended up dragging Arthur down with her. That was the story they told themselves. It made them feel better about bleeding him dry. Grandpa never said anything bad about them, not once, but he did small things, quiet things that told me he knew, like the way he'd only ever bring me, not my cousins, to his workshop where he carved those beautiful wooden clocks. Or how he insisted I be the one to fix his old record player instead of hiring someone. He'd say, some things you hand down with your own hands, not just money. I didn't realize how literal he meant that until after he got sick. Pancreatic cancer is cruel. It's like watching someone shrink into themselves while pretending they're not. When he was first diagnosed, the family chat lit up with empty sympathy. Let us know if you need anything. Wishing you strength. We'll visit soon. And then silence. A few weeks later, I found out Uncle Greg had used Grandpa's name to close a real estate deal. Aunt Vanessa tried to get him to transfer the deed to the lake house to her before anything happens, just to be safe. It was disgusting. But Grandpa didn't get angry. He just smiled that quiet smile of his and said, the truth comes out eventually. It always does. That's when he asked me to start helping with some things. His finances, the property records, even his voicemail. I thought he just wanted company. Looking back now, he was setting the stage. The last few weeks of his life, I spent nearly every day with him. We'd talk, sometimes for hours. Other times, we just sat, the TV humming in the background. He asked a lot of questions about my work, my life, my plans. He even made me promise I'd fix up the workshop one day, turn it into something meaningful. I didn't understand why he kept bringing that up. Not until the final week when he handed me a small envelope with a USB drive inside. Don't open it yet, he said, his voice raspy. There'll be a time when it makes sense, you'll know. I nodded, I didn't question it. I couldn't, my throat was already too tight. He passed 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep. My mom was with him. She held his hand until the nurses came. The funeral was polite, controlled. Aunt Vanessa cried loudly, which was ironic considering she hadn't seen him in months. My cousin Jamie, her son, posted a picture of the casket with some cheesy quote about legacy and family. Uncle Greg gave a speech about how Arthur was the glue of this family, even though he hadn't returned a single call during Grandpa's last month alive. I stayed silent. My mom stood beside me, her face unreadable. Then came the will reading. It was held in Grandpa's study, the one with the leather armchairs and the smell of pine and pipe tobacco that never quite faded. The lawyer, Mr. Pearson, was an old friend of Grandpa's, sharp guy, serious. He didn't waste time with small talk. As soon as everyone sat down, he opened the folder and began reading. The first part was standard. Small bequests, donations to charities, a few personal items left to old friends. Then he got to the part everyone was waiting for, the big stuff. To my daughter, Vanessa, he read, I leave the sum of $1 as a token of my affection and a reminder of the countless more you took without asking. The silence was instant. Aunt Vanessa let out a small laugh, like she thought it was a joke. Mr. Pearson didn't even blink. To my son-in-law, Greg, he continued, who knew how to ask for more. I leave the pleasure of earning something on his own for once. That's when the whispering started. My cousin Jamie leaned over to his sister and muttered something. My mom sat frozen. I stared straight ahead, my heart thudding in my chest. Mr. Pearson cleared his throat. To my grandson, Oliver. Everyone turned to look at me. I leave the house, the lake property, the workshop, and the remainder of my estate to be used at his discretion, without interference. The room exploded. What? Vanessa barked. He barely even visited him. He wasn't there when Dad needed him. Greg shouted. You mean when he needed help eating? I said quietly, because I was the one cleaning up after him while you were in Barbados. They all started shouting at once. Accusations, curses, protests about fairness. And that's when Jamie, smug as ever, said, You didn't even visit him in the hospital. I didn't respond. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope Grandpa had given me. I slid the USB drive across the table toward Mr. Pearson. He said this should be played today. I said calmly, in front of everyone, What is it? Aunt Vanessa sneered. Some fake video you made. Mr. Pearson stood, walked to the TV in the corner of the study, and plugged in the drive. I looked at my mom. She hadn't said a word the entire time. Her hands were folded in her lap, trembling slightly. Then the screen lit up. Grandpa's face appeared. He was in his chair by the window, sunlight casting lines across his face. He looked tired, but his voice was clear. If you're watching this, he said, then you've already heard the will, and judging by the noise, some of you aren't too happy. That's fine. I expected it. The room went quiet again. He leaned forward. But before you say anything else, there's something I need you to know. He took a long breath in the video, his fingers curled over the armrests, knuckles pale, but his voice never wavered. I wasn't planning on making this, Grandpa said. Honestly, I thought I could just let the paperwork speak for itself. But then I heard about the little meeting Vanessa had last month. You remember that, don't you, sweetheart? The one at your house where you discussed how to nudge me into signing things while I was still coherent. Vanessa's face went red instantly. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but no sound came out. Jamie glanced at her, his smug grin gone. I might be old. Grandpa continued, but I'm not blind or deaf or stupid. And I certainly didn't forget the times I asked for a ride to the doctor and got told, we're out of town, sorry. Or when I mentioned I was feeling weak, and the response was, maybe you should get someone to help you full time. As if I wasn't surrounded by family who claimed to love me. Aunt Vanessa finally found her voice. This is edited. This is fake. Mr. Pearson turned to her, his expression stone cold. This video was recorded in my presence, dated, time-stamped, and witnessed. On screen, Grandpa let out a soft chuckle. But not everyone treated me like I was a burden. Not everyone came around just to ask for a favor or dangle some sob story about mortgage payments. Oliver, he came without asking, sat with me, read to me, cleaned up after me. He didn't care about what I had. He cared about who I was. That's why I chose him. Uncle Greg leaned forward, his jaw tight. This is ridiculous. He never even liked being in the house. He hated the lake. This was all supposed to go to the family, not just one person. Grandpa must have anticipated that too, because the video kept rolling with brutal precision. Greg, you always said I should modernize the will. Make it easier to divide. You meant easier to take. You lied to me. You forged my name on a vehicle transfer 2 years ago. Remember that. You told me the DMV messed it up. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Greg's face went white. In Vanessa, Grandpa said, his eyes hard now, I know about the bank account in your name that you opened using my power of attorney signature. You transferred nearly 20 grand into it before I caught on. Claimed it was reimbursement for years of caregiving. I have the statements. Vanessa actually stood up. This is a setup, she snapped. This is insane. You can sit down. Mr. Pearson said, there's more. I watched as my grandfather's face softened slightly on the screen. As for the rest of you, I want to say this clearly. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I spent the last 2 years of my life watching my family treat my illness like an obstacle to their inheritance. The only person who never asked me for anything was the one I gave everything to. Then he turned his head and looked directly into the camera. Oliver, if they fight this, play them the second video. The screen went black. There was a long dead silence. No one moved. My hands were flat on my thighs, damp with sweat. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Vanessa slowly sat back down, her eyes wild, flicking between me and the TV. What second video? James asked, his voice cracking. I didn't answer. Mr. Pearson did. It's locked and secured. If necessary, it will be submitted in court along with medical records, legal documentation, and the signed witness reports. Court, Greg repeated. You think this will hold up in court, Mr.? Pearson turned a page in his folder and said coolly, You're welcome to contest the will, but I should warn you, Mr. Caldwell retained an attorney months ago in anticipation. You'll find your legal options are limited. Vanessa laughed again, a strained, jittery sound. So what? Oliver gets everything, just like that. No, I said finally, not just like that. Everyone turned to look at me again. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I didn't ask for any of this, but Grandpa made his choice, and you know what? I spent months wondering why, wondering if I even deserved it, watching him fade and being unable to do anything. That haunts me, and while you were out throwing parties and buying vacation homes with his money, I was sitting beside his hospital bed, holding a straw to his lips so he could sip water. So yeah, maybe I didn't visit him in the hospital the way you think I should have, because I lived in it. James stood up, face flushed. You're just a loser with a hero complex. Better than a leech with a trust fund addiction. I said, standing too, you never cared about him, you just cared about what he could give you. No one spoke after that. The lawyer quietly gathered his papers. My mom still hadn't moved, just sat there, quietly holding her hands together, watching everything unravel. I turned to her. You okay? She nodded slowly. I just didn't think he'd actually do it. I knew he talked about it, but he meant every word. I said, Mr. Pearson looked up. We're done here for today. I'll be sending the formal documentation to each party, and I suggest strongly that no one attempt to contact Mr. Caldwell, unless you plan to do so with respect. They all glared at me as I walked to the door. I reached for the knob, then paused and looked back over my shoulder. Oh, I said, and about that second video, I haven't watched it yet, but I've got a feeling it's even worse for you than the first one. I walked out. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close, because what came next wasn't just the fallout. It was the real reason Grandpa recorded that second video, and what he asked me to do with it, and that. That's where the real revenge begins. Decline, understandable, given the circumstances. My client is hoping for an equitable resolution. You mean a buyout? I said flatly. He chuckled. I wouldn't call it that, but yes, an arrangement that avoids ugliness on both sides. I looked out the window at the maple tree swaying in the front yard. Did Greg tell you he stole from the estate? There was a pause. I'm not aware of any such. I have the bank records. I have a notarized statement from the day Grandpa revoked his power of attorney. I have a video of Grandpa outlining every illegal move your client made. You want to go to court? Go ahead. Just know, you're going to lose. Another pause. Then a sigh. May I speak candidly? No. I hung up. That evening I got a knock at my front door. It was Jamie. He stood there in a puffy jacket, holding a six-pack of cheap beer like he thought that would erase everything. His eyes darted past me like he expected someone else to be home. Can we talk? He asked. I didn't say anything. He shifted on his feet. Look, man, I know they've been pushy, but we didn't mean to mess you over, okay? It's just, this family's complicated. Grandpa always treated you like the golden child. You thought if you ignored him long enough, he'd still give you everything. I said. You thought just showing up for the funeral was enough. His jaw tightened. I just want to make things right. I stared at him for a long time. Then I said, then go home. Tell your mom and your uncle to drop the suit, and tell them if they don't I'm not just defending Grandpa's wishes. I'm going public. He blinked. Public? I've got emails, texts, copies of everything. If they want to fight dirty, I'll show the world exactly who they are. He didn't respond. He just stood there for a second, then turned and walked back down the steps. But something in his expression told me it wasn't over. Not yet, because the next morning I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just one sentence typed in bold across the page. You think you won, but he never told you everything. And beneath it was a photo of me as a child sitting in Grandpa's workshop next to someone I didn't recognize. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, same hair color as me, same sharp chin, only I wasn't an only child. Or so I'd always thought. And that's when everything shifted. For hours, I stared at that photo. It was faded and curling at the corners, printed on old glossy paper, but it was real. I was there, probably no older than 7, sitting cross-legged on the workshop floor, clutching one of Grandpa's handmade wooden clocks with both hands. And next to me was a boy, same age. His face was turned slightly toward the camera, but even with the blur, the resemblance was uncanny. Not just to me, but to Grandpa, that square jaw, the arched brows, the way his hand rested on my shoulder like he belonged there. I flipped the photo over. One thing was written on the back in Grandpa's careful cursive: Oliver and Simon, summer '99. Simon, the name meant nothing to me, no childhood friend, no distant cousin. I'd never heard it before in my life. I pulled out every old family photo album I had. Nothing, not even a hint of another boy. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart, Mom." I said, barely holding the phone to my ear, "Did I have a cousin named Simon?" Silence. "Mom," her voice was soft, careful, "where did you hear that name? There was a photo of me and a boy in Grandpa's workshop. It says Oliver and Simon on the back." Another pause, a longer one, then finally she sighed. "I was wondering when that would come up. You knew about him." "I did," she said, "but it wasn't my place to tell you. He wasn't your cousin. He was your half-brother." I froze. "What?" "Your grandfather had a son long before you were born, before even I was. It was the early 70s. He was young, barely 20, got a woman pregnant. Her name was Lorraine. They weren't married, and her family didn't approve. They moved away before the baby was born. Your grandfather lost contact. Years later, he found out Lorraine had passed the boy. Simon was in foster care by then. Grandpa tracked him down when Simon was maybe 8, started visiting, helping quietly. He didn't tell the rest of the family. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. "Why didn't he ever tell me? He was ashamed," she said. "Not of Simon, never of him, but of how much he'd missed. He didn't want to burden either of you. And then, when you were born, he saw something in you. You reminded him of Simon, so he started bringing you two together. Just quietly, just as friends. You were too young to remember." "So what happened to him?" Her voice broke slightly. "He passed away in 2002. There was an accident, car crash on the interstate. He was 14. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He passed away," I whispered. "And Grandpa never talked about him again. He never stopped mourning him," she said. "He kept a photo of Simon in his wallet until the day he passed. That boy. He was part of why Grandpa got so involved in your life. He couldn't save Simon, but he could love you." I sat there, letting it all settle in. I thought I knew everything there was to know about Grandpa, but the more I uncovered, the more I realized he had layers even we never saw: regret, grief, secrets he carried like stones. Later that day, I went back into the study and opened the safe again. I didn't know what I was looking for, just that something else had to be there. And at the very bottom, beneath all the legal documents and titles, I found a sealed envelope. My name was on the front. I opened it. Inside was a letter. *** Oliver, if you're reading this, then everything else has already happened. The will, the videos, the outrage. I'm sorry you had to be the one to clean up my mess, but I trust you more than anyone. That trust was earned, not inherited. There's something I didn't include in the videos, not because I wanted to keep it from you, but because I wanted you to know it when you were ready. You had a brother once. His name was Simon. He was my son. I failed him, not in the end, but in the beginning. I wasn't there when he needed me most. I let shame and fear dictate my decisions. By the time I found him again, he was already worn down by a system that doesn't love its children. But you brought joy into his life. You don't remember, but he used to talk about you like you were the son. When's Ollie coming back? Can I show Ollie my drawing? You saved something in him, even if it was just..." For a while after he passed away, I shut down. I let the family circle tighter and tighter around my money, hoping it would distract them. It did, but it also made me see how empty that circle had become. So when I got sick, I started putting things in place, not just to protect what I had, but to protect you because you're the best of me, and the best of him. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let them twist this. You didn't take anything from them. You just got back what they thought was already theirs. Love always, Grandpa. ***, I cried when I read that. Not quiet tears either, full ugly sobs that shook my shoulders and stained the paper. I read the letter again and again until the words blurred. In the days that followed, the lawsuit collapsed. Once Mr. Pearson presented the full records, video testimony, and the paper trail. Their attorneys advised them to settle. They signed the documents quietly with forced smiles and bitter eyes. Vanessa tried to corner me in the parking lot afterward, all syrupy sweet. "We just want what's fair," she said. I looked her in the eye and said, so did Grandpa. She didn't speak to me again. Greg vanished. Word got around that he sold his house and moved to Arizona. Jamie unfollowed me on every social platform and posted a vague quote about snakes in the family. In me, I stayed. I moved into the house. I cleaned up the workshop, restored the old clock tools, repaired the record player. I even found some of Simon's drawings in an old box, crayon sketches of birds and trees, and a rocket ship labeled Ollie plus C's Space Adventure. I framed that one. One night, a few months later, I stood by the lake watching the moon reflect off the still water and thought about how everything could have gone so differently. How one man's silence, his quiet love, his secret pain had shaped all of this. I thought about Simon, how I barely remembered him but somehow still felt like he was part of me, and I thought about Grandpa, about his voice, his steadiness, his quiet revenge. He didn't just leave me a house. He left me the truth, and that was worth more than all their inheritance combined.